Welcome, my children. Let me ask you all something. Do you fear death? Do you fear the end of your existence? Do you perhaps feel that death is just a transitioning period? Do you feel that it's something to be celebrated? Is it perhaps something you anticipate, either with glee or out of fear? Is death your companion or your enemy? What do you imagine death appearing as? One thing's for certain, my children. Death wears many faces around this world. And sometimes death can wear the faces of your loved ones. Yes. This tome is available on Amazon and the Citadel in ebook and paperback. But death has gone by many different names and many different faces throughout the world. And tonight, we're going to see a few of them. Our first entry brings us to the ancient Slavic civilization with Morana, the death-bringing winter goddess. The Slavs had a complex vision of death and the underworld. They were not always synonymous, and how they were viewed could vary from one tribe to the next. Morana is largely considered as the chief goddess of death in the Slavic culture. She also goes by the name of Marzana, Marina, and Mara. She is associated with seasonal changes, such as from winter to spring or from summer to fall. But mainly the seasonal changes that would bring death and rebirth. In the complex myths and legends of the Slavs, Morana arrives with the winter, and it is the winter that is her domain. And with winter, death is most likely to descend upon the land. Crops cannot grow, famine sets in, and life becomes challenging. Towards the end of the winter, complex rituals were performed as believers attempted to drive off the goddess. It was believed that the winter's end was the death of the goddess and the rebirth of Vesna, the goddess of spring. She was also considered the goddess of dreams, nightmares, and sorcery, and likened to the Greek goddess Hecate. Today, in most Slavic languages, the words denoting dreams and nightmares have Mara as their root, coming from the name of this venerated, feared, and powerful mistress of the winter and of death. From the ancient Slavs, we now migrate to ancient Egypt. For the Chimaic culture, death was not the end, but the passage into new life, something greater and far more complex than the mortal plane. When an Egyptian died, it was believed that their soul, or their ka, would be weighed on a scale. The result of this weighing would decide whether or not they'd enter Duat, or the underworld. The judge of this, or the one responsible for leading in the ka into whatever afterlife, be it either Duat or Ra's boat. The one responsible for curating the souls was none other than the jackal-headed Egyptian and deity Anubis. Anubis is the god connected to death, embalming, and the afterlife, and the underworld. He presides over the heart-weighing ceremony, and ushers the dead into the realm of Duat. Anubis is depicted as having a body of a man, the head of an Egyptian golden wolf, or a jackal. He had a brother, the god Whippawet, who also had the head of a wolf. For this reason, Egyptians offered sacrifices to Anubis, which consisted of mummified jackals. Thousands of these animals were discovered in the burial fields of Saqqara and elsewhere. In the later history of Egypt, Osiris replaced Anubis as the ruler of the underworld, but the latter still wielded power over the dead, guiding them across the threshold into the realm of death. And from the Babylonian and Mesopotamian culture, we migrate to the Aztec culture. The people most notable for spreading the rumor that the year 2012 would spell this world's end. We have the terrible death god of the Aztec underworld, Mictlantecutli. In the Aztec civilization, death was a major aspect, and therefore these peoples had many diverse gods and goddesses connected strictly to death and the dead. Mictlantecutli, however, is one that's a bit of a cut above the rest. A major Aztec deity, he is the god of death and the ruler of Mictlan, the lowest region of the Aztec underworld. He's boasted several names and titles, including Nixtapua, the scatterer of ashes, Ixputzek, the broken face, and Zonontemok, he who lowers his head. In almost every depiction or adaptation of Mictlantecutli, he is almost always depicted as a pale and ghastly skeletal figure, spattered with blood. Together with his consort Mictlantecutli, I'm going to admit, my children, I am not at all good at pronouncing these names. But with his consort Mictlantecutli dwelt in a grim house without windows in the darkness of the underworld. The Aztecs commonly associated this god with bats, spiders, owls, and other nocturnal creatures. Nevertheless, he was actively worshipped, likely in an attempt to avert his wrath. Ceremonies in the temples of Mictlantecutli involved ritual cannibalism and human sacrifice. Those that died were buried with rich grave goods. These served not as a way for those that departed to carry these earthly treasures into the afterlife, such as the case with the ancient Egyptians. No, these were gifts to Mictlantlicutli once the spirit of a dead person finally reached the underworld. And in the comments section, I want you to type #DeathGod so that I may see you. Next, from the Aztecs, we now migrate to India in the Middle East, where we meet the venerable death god of the Hindu peoples, Yama. Both the Hindu and Buddhist religions are filled with diverse and often dark morbid deities. Yama, or Yamara, is the god of death and the underworld, and also one of the oldest and most important deities in the worldviews of the Hindu and Buddhist peoples. In mythology, Yama is the son of the great god Surya, who was the very first human being to have died. Because of this, he became ruler of the dead, and presiding over the underworld as the lord of spirits and deceased. Yama was said to be a just and righteous god, and stern to boot. In the underworld, he dispenses justice and punishment to the sinners in his realm. In most depictions, Yama is shown to be a blue or dark complexioned man who rides astride a buffalo. In his arms he carries a noose and a mace, the tools he uses for capturing the souls of the dead. And to this day, he remains one of the oldest and most prominent Hindu gods. Astride a bison with a noose and a mace. Gotta wonder what kind of souls he has to go after with those. Are you curious about that, my children? Type in the comments why you think he needs a noose and a mace. For our final entry, my children, we have the demon of Incan and Amharic folklore. The demon dispenser of death for the Incas, we have Supe, a major deity in Quechua, Inca, and the Aymara myths and beliefs. This demonic being was the god of death and the overlord of the Incan underworld, which was known as Ucupaca or Uchupacha. Presiding over the deceased as well as a race of cruel demons, Supe was envisioned as a demonic entity with a grim face and twisting malignant horns. The Incas greatly feared this god and worshipped him and sacrificed to him simply to avert his wrath. Because of these negative connotations and the fear he instilled in his worshippers, the Incan Supe has been largely synonymous with that of the Christian devil following the Spanish colonization of the Americas. In fact, over the centuries, the name Supe was the local word used for the Christian devil. However, in pre-Christian times, the indigenous peoples performed many elaborate and evocative dances and rituals dedicated to the god Supe. Interesting, isn't it, my children? You dance in glee and then fall to your knees in fear for one god. As always, I must thank Travis Bruce and the Horror Realm for allowing me to bring you all to meet the many faces of the Reaper. As always, you may find me on Facebook under my name, Thomas Stewart, or you may follow my Corpse Child Sanctuary Facebook page. You may find me on Instagram at CorpseChild2001, and you may find me on TikTok and Slasher at Unholy Corpse Child. As well, and you may find all of my books on Amazon, such as this one. Until next time, my children.